Hello and welcome to the OP Overwatch Podcast, a podcast focused on Overwatch strategy, tactics, characters, and general discussion. I'm your host, Jam, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing awesome, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm very excited to get to our next character breakdown. However, there have been some recent updates to Overwatch, specifically a patch for balancing that I'm really excited to get to talking about.
Yeah, the patch came down this morning. We talked a little bit in our last episode about the expected changes to McCree, and we did get that. The specifics of that came out that they just lowered the damage from 70 to 45 on Fan the Hammer, which is pretty significant and should definitely solve the problem of him burning tanks down too quickly. But there was also an unexpected change that I mentioned was rumored out there, but we hadn't really gotten any confirmation. But they nerfed Widowmaker a little bit, dropped her damage on a fully charged snipe. It's going to go from 150 to 120. So that's a pretty big deal because she was one-shotting Zenyatta and Tracer even if they weren't headshots. They did boost her critical multiplier, so her headshots are still going to do 300 damage, which is what they were doing before. And I think that feels right to me, just because you should reward your sniper for getting headshots, but the body shots were a little bit too forgiving, I think. And then the other subtle change they made to her is they change her ultimate timer so that it's increased by 10%. It's just going to come up a little bit less often. So, obviously with the changes today, McCree and Widow are hurt by this. My question is, who do you think benefits from this? Which characters are going to get more play out of this?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, as we discussed before, I think McCree was definitely the loudest cries we were hearing in the community as far as how powerful he was. So starting with him, I feel, as I mentioned before, as a tank player, it was really, really damaging to fight a McCree and just take that damage extremely rapidly. So it's kind of good news to hear when, as a tank player, to go against McCree, that the actual damage has been reduced a little bit. I feel that was, a pretty reasonable balance for that character. As far as who benefits, it's kind of interesting because I feel that whereas most people would pick McCree because he was a little bit quote-unquote overpowered compared to the other characters, it's going to give a lot of players a chance to kind of maybe float over to some of the other characters, maybe a Zenyatta or, a Soldier 76, some of the other characters that weren't as easy to win with, and it'll kind of create balance. And it's interesting that you say, everybody focuses on, this character is going to be stronger, they nerfed this character, but very rarely do a lot of people talk about what other characters will this update increase their strength. So, yeah, I feel like a lot of the other characters that are played a lot less, like Zenyatta, some of the support characters, are really going to benefit from this update.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the tanks are the clear winner with the McCree nerf. I think Reaper is probably going to get a lot more play to fill that role now. If you're looking for the attack character to burn down tanks, Reaper's the guy now. But my hope is that by removing this automatic selection that was McCree, that it'll end up bringing all the other characters into the fold in different ways. Maybe, on certain maps, that spot goes to a Tracer now, or to a Genji. So I'm hoping that this kind of opens things up and it really lets the community explore it a little bit more instead of just the automatic McCree, even if it wasn't the best for that comp or that situation. He was just so powerful you had to choose him. And then I think the winner of the Widow nerf is definitely Zenyatta. I feel like Tracer was doing all right, even though she could get one shot with a body shot, just because Tracer is so hard to hit. But Zenyatta's were just the easiest targets for Widowmakers. So I think Zenyatta's the clear winner, with Tracer also will obviously benefit. But I also think Hanzo is going to be a big beneficiary of this because he now does as much damage as Widow with his arrows, and so I think he just became a lot more viable, even if Widow is still that instant twitch character. I mean, if the damage is the same, I think a lot of people like Hanzo and will roll him out and give him a shot.
Yeah, I feel giving Hanzo a better chance as a sniper is a great idea. It's kind of a surprise that Widowmaker was given this kind of nerf to me. Of course, I don't play a whole lot of Widowmaker, but as I've discussed before, I think that a lot of the wins with Widowmaker can be attributed to the fact that her skill set is that of a traditional sniper from most FPS games. So it's something that I feel, similar to Soldier 76, people are going to be automatically good with those characters. However, I don't think it's a bad idea to kind of drop down the damage as they did with her, because once again, as a tank player, it's nice to kind of have a better chance with those body shots. As a large character like Diva or Winston, it's going to be a lot easier to hit with a Widowmaker. So it's nice to kind of see that balance to make the game a little more fair for some of the other classes. But ultimately, what you want to do with a balance like this is, like you said, you want to increase the chance of other characters being played. You don't want one character to be too weak or another one to be your go-to for winning. And Blizzard puts a big focus on this when they balance their characters. And I don't think they do it lightly. And granted, you're always going to have people in the community that are going to have their own opinions. I've already seen with the current patch that a lot of people are complaining that McCree wasn't nerfed enough. But it's one of those things where it's really only time is going to tell. I feel Blizzard does a lot of extensive testing on their games, so it seems fair to me. Nothing seems completely outrageous for either character, so really only time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, McCree's still supposed to be able to kill you if he points at you and shoots you enough times. It's not like they took a gun away. So, he's just not supposed to be able to kill tanks before they know they're in a fight. I think people are so probably angsty about McCree now that they just want it to be where he can't kill you anymore, and that's certainly not what they're going to do. But yeah, I mean, you have to trust Blizzard at some point. They've been balancing characters in games for a long time, and when everyone's picking one character, it's pretty obvious which way the wind's blowing. I'm a little bit surprised by the Widow nerf, not just because we didn't hear about it, but because, as I mentioned in our last episode, she wasn't really considered to be a problem on console. So I have to think that it's a rather slight change. It's a big deal for Zenyatta, but for everyone else, it's still going to be 2 shots and you're dead for most of your standard 200 HP characters. So I'm sure they know what they're doing, and if they went too far one way with either of these characters, they'll bring it back in the near future. So it should be all right.
Yeah, and on top of that, you're going to have situations where there's still a lot of people who are going to jump in the game who haven't purchased or played the game yet. They're very excited. There's a lot of hype for Overwatch. So it's going to be nice to get some of these new players in-game playing a more balanced version of the game. And they already don't have these stigmas that some of the more veteran players do. So while there will be complaints about character balancing at all times from everyone, it's nice that Blizzard kind of keeps updating to make as many characters playable as possible and make you feel like no matter what playstyle you have, you're going to be able to jump in the game and feel like you have a chance. So I think that's very important. But getting back into our in-depth character breakdown, we've already discussed a few characters earlier. Today we're going to talk about one of my personal favorites, a character from the defense class, Mei.
Every day is a new adventure.
So Mei is admittedly one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite character in Overwatch. She is such a fantastic character because she's so different from any other character that you see in, most FPSs. She fights completely differently. She's not your typical, I'm an assault rifle class, I'm a sniper or anything like that. She's extremely versatile, and I don't even know where to start. She is ridiculously fun to play, and you can play her in so many different ways. There's so much opportunity to be creative with her, and you can help your team both offensively and defensively with this character.
Yeah, Mei is definitely a favorite of mine as well. I feel like we could probably do a 3-hour podcast just on Mei, but in the interest of keeping it short and sweet and relevant, we'll try and keep it less than that. But I think she's so cool because she helps the team in so many non-traditional ways. She is such a creative character. I mean, once you get comfortable with her abilities, you can do things that no other character can do, and it just really opens up a lot of possibilities for just having fun and messing with the other team.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to kind of cover the general background of Mei. So Mei is a hero from China. She's a scientist, an environmentalist, also a climatologist. And she is all about using ice and freezing abilities to face off her opponents. So what's interesting about Mei is that she can do ongoing damage over time, at a short range, and she also can do decent damage at long range. But beyond her just attacking abilities, she also has different abilities that control the speed of your opponents, that can freeze them in place, and she can also put up barriers that can either block opponents or protect your allies. So she's a very, very interesting character, and she has a lot of abilities that are interesting to play with.
Yeah, and when she starts getting in range to use that Frost Stream, her main attack ability, it just locks people down. It's a hard counter to Genji, who's another one of my favorites, so I'm very wary and have a lot of respect for Mei. But yeah, the Frost Stream, not just Genji, any character can get frozen and all of a sudden they're just getting headshotted and they can't move and it's a mess. So you gotta have respect for Mei, you gotta keep your distance, and you gotta watch out for her.
For sure. So starting out with just her basic abilities, Mei's normal attack is called her endothermic blasters, or the Frost Stream as you've been calling it. It's absolute fear when it comes out into the battlefield, because basically what it does, it's a continuous concentrated short range stream of frost damage, and it's considered short range, but it has a surprisingly long range at times. Sometimes it starts hitting you when you think you're completely out of range of it, but it continually does damage, and it actually slows you down over time, similar to Symmetra's turrets. But what's interesting about this ability is that as it's hitting you, as you're slowing down, if you get hit by it, and if it connects for a long enough time, it'll ultimately freeze the enemy in place, and you'll continue taking damage while not being able to do anything. And when I say anything, I mean you can't move, you can't do an attack, you can't do an ability. You know, if you're playing Tracer, your recall is usually your way out of danger. You can't even do that. It just completely freezes you in place, leaving you open to not only Mei's other attacks, but to the entire team's other attacks. So this is a move that is dangerous to both attack class, defense class, and tank class, all across the board.
Yeah, and I think the exact number is it'll freeze somebody after they've taken 80 damage from it, which is like a little bit less than 2 seconds of consecutive damage if you just, if you're hitting them nonstop with it. And then if an opponent, like if you can get away from it and not take damage for 2 seconds, it'll reset that counter to be frozen solid. So as soon as you start getting hit by it, I mean, if you have an ability to dash or jump or blink out of there, you want to start building your distance to reset that timer. Worth noting that it doesn't go through shields or barriers, so you can't freeze Reinhardt from right in front of him. You have to get around behind him or through Winston's barrier. So it won't go through those.
Yeah, so Mei's not someone that you want to be close to. Generally, when you're fighting her, you want to stay as far away as possible. But that does not mean that you're out of danger entirely just because you're not close. Because as her alternate fire, your right click, is a icicle projectile that she can shoot, and it does pretty ridiculous damage, especially if it's a headshot. It can actually take out most of the attack class characters with a single headshot, and it shoots icicles with your alternate fire. So you can immediately go from a short range freezing blast to something that shoots medium to long range and does a decent amount of damage with a quick adjust of the fire. So she has some options with her attacking, and that's just with her basic endothermic blaster weapon.
Yeah, the icicles are more dangerous than people realize, I think. I think you get the feeling that you're safe if you're out of range of the Frost Stream, but all of a sudden you're getting headshotted for significant amounts of damage, and you forget that she also has these icicles. So she's a dangerous character from medium range too. They do have some damage fall off, so once you get to like Widowmaker and Hanzo range, she's not going to pick you off with 1 or 2 shots. But yeah, up close or medium range, she is deadly.
Yeah, it's interesting to have a character that's very powerful, both close, medium, and long range. And while she's not considered a sniper by any means, I've definitely taken on some Widowmakers and Hanzos with her and gotten some pretty significant headshots with her. So she is a force to be reckoned with at even a long range as well. And that's just her regular weapon. Some of her other abilities add even more to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And before we move on to those, I just want to mention a really prominent combo. If you can freeze someone in place and then just rail them with one point-blank icicle, that's usually enough to do more than 200 damage. That'll kill most non-tank heroes in the game. So that's a pretty common occurrence, and definitely one of the best uses for the icicles is just to finish people off once you've frozen them solid.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. And outside of gameplay mechanics, there's definitely a certain mental aspect to it. When you're playing against a Mei and you get frozen solid and she just walks right up to you and uses that alternate fire icicle and just headshots you right in the face. In Overwatch, so far, everything I've come across, there's a few things. That's got to be at least the top 5 most infuriating things that can happen in the game is just basically that feeling of helplessness when you're going against her.
Yep, and you're just pushing every button on the keyboard and nothing's going to work. She's just emoting, waving at you, and then just right between the eyes. It's a mess.
Yeah, Mei is definitely the gold medal winner for most broken keyboards in Overwatch because it's just ridiculous when she starts getting her combos on her. And that's just her regular ability of the endothermic blasters. Moving on to her next ability, the cryo freeze. This ability is amazing. It is a ability that basically encapsulates you in ice. It lasts 4 seconds. And it actually heals you, and you're completely immune to damage the entire time. So in this respect, we've already talked about how with her regular weapon, Mei is both short, medium, and long range, a force to be reckoned with. But now you can almost play her as a pseudo tank because you can literally jump in. 4 seconds is a long time in a video game. So to actually jump in the fray and be able to use an ability like her cryo freeze and just be invulnerable for 4 straight seconds is amazing. And what's amazing on top of that is she actually recharges her health at the same time. So not only are you not taking damage, but if you have taken damage, you're recovering that health as well. And it's an extremely useful ability, especially when you're in a deep pinch in some of the, more intense battles that you have in Overwatch.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to call it Ice Block because I played WoW and I know an Ice Block when I see one. But yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, yeah, going fully immune for 4 seconds is a big deal. Healing for 150 health, more than half of her health, is a big deal. You really don't even need a healer if you can use the Ice Block and then get out of combat and get your health back. And yeah, so she can really take care of herself more than a lot of other characters. It's also really good for, using it to save yourself from ultimates. If you can't get out of line of sight of like Diva's ultimate or any source of damage, it's going to save you. So it's a fantastic ability to have on cooldown.
Now, it's important to mention that while you're in this, it's not a completely broken move. You can't do any attacks. You can't move. You're completely frozen solid inside of this icicle. And so if you jump into the middle of a fight and you don't have teammates around to kind of support you, you can basically be invulnerable for 4 seconds. But after that, it's very common to see maybe 3 or 4, opposing teammates immediately attack you and kill Mei right afterwards. And she's not a traditional tank by any means, so she doesn't have a super high HP pool. So it's not something I'd recommend just going in and trying to take on an entire team by yourself with Mei. However, like I said earlier, in a pinch, it's a great way to survive. And sometimes, when you get somebody attacking you or someone who can, come in close range with a shotgun or even with an ultimate attack, 4 seconds is a long time to be able to survive through that.
Yeah, it buys a lot of time for holding points and things like that. A nice follow-up to that is as soon as the ice block runs out, you can put an ice wall up right underneath you if you've got people waiting to attack you, and it'll pop you up on top of the wall, so that'll definitely get you out of their crosshairs, and they'll have to try and take a second to find you. So not to say that you're going to be able to kill them all, but if you're just trying to buy time or escape, following up with an ice wall is a really good way to go.
Yeah, so let's talk about this ice wall, because out of all of Mei's abilities, and honestly, for me personally, I think one of my favorite abilities in the game, if not my favorite ability in the game, is Mei's ice wall, because it's ridiculous. There's so many applications for it. I've never seen an ability like this used in a game. How it is used by Mei in Overwatch, it is ridiculous. So Ice Wall is Mei's other ability. Basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. She has the ability to kind of point forward and put a wall of ice in front of her. It lasts 4.5 seconds. It has a 10-second cooldown, which in the fray is not too long of a time to wait. But what's interesting about this ability is that the ice wall obstructs the line of sight. It stops movement. and it can block attacks as well. And not, on top of that, you can also use it as a platform for both your teammates and as a unsuspecting platform for enemies. If you are really, really good with the ice wall, you can create some havoc and some really interesting situations in the battles in Overwatch.
Yeah, the cooldown feels right. It feels like it's up almost all the time when you need it, which is great. And you can definitely get creative with it. I mean, like you said, you can use it underneath enemies and split a team in half. You can create a wall between a healer and their tank. So yeah, you got to get creative with it. I would, just as a disclaimer, I would caution that you use it responsibly. You are also creating a wall that your teammates can't shoot or see through. So if you've got a teammate that just used their high noon and then you put a wall up between your team and the other team, your McCree's not going to be thrilled with you. So, using it to save yourself, there's no question, but you want to try and communicate too, like most aspects of this game, but especially when it comes to, I don't know, blocking your own teammates' ultimates, you definitely want to coordinate that.
Yeah, not only with Mei's Ice Wall, but I think in a lot of scenarios you want to make sure that you're communicating with your teammates because it's such an interesting mix of characters and a grab bag of different abilities that it's very easy to kind of throw each other off. But specifically with the Ice Wall, yeah, it's it's very easy. It's something that literally can block someone's walking path. You can block off hallways, can block attacks. So while that is useful against enemies, like you said, it's going to also impede on your teammates. So if you're not calling them out, you have to be super aware of what's going on around you and use that communication to kind of make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to put your teammates at a disadvantage. But that being said, the Ice Wall is a great way to counter your close range fighters like your Roadhogs and your Reapers. If someone's close by and doing damage, you literally can put a wall up and block that damage, protecting yourself and your teammates. And it's also a great counter to snipers as well. If you have your Hanzo or you have a Widowmaker out in the distance, the wall goes a decent amount of distance in front of you. So you can actually completely put up a wall in front of a sniper, and for 4.5 seconds, they're no longer a sniper. They're just another member of the team that's not doing anything for about 4 seconds. And 4 seconds is plenty of time to actually clean up some of the close range characters if you're coordinating correctly.
Yeah, you can use it to block off snipers or just block off flank doorways. It just lets your team focus if you're using it correctly, especially on defense. It just takes away one avenue of attack. So yeah, it buys you some time. It's very, very useful. Speaking of useful, her ultimate is one of the coolest abilities in the game.
Yeah, Mei's ultimate ability is Blizzard. So Blizzard is interesting. It's a projectile that she actually kind of underhand tosses in front of her. Doesn't go a very long distance, but basically what it does is she tosses her snowball, which is the little robot that she carries with her behind her. And what it does is wherever she tosses it, it lands. And there's an area, a pretty large area of effect around the robot that kind of rotates and creates a blizzard. And every enemy that is in that area of effect takes ongoing damage and also basically follows the same sort of parameters that they would if they were getting hit with her normal endothermic blaster attack. So they start taking slow damage, they start slowing down their movement, and over time, if they're stuck in that area for a while, they freeze in place. So it's almost like using her regular firing attack, but in a wide area of an effect, so you can hit multiple enemies at one time. And mind you, while that's happening, she's not immobile. She can continue doing her normal Mei tricks. You can put up ice walls, you can cryo freeze, you can attack with your normal attack, doing double damage if you're hitting with both your main and alternate fire while an enemy's stuck in there. So it is very, very useful, but it's also very obvious. So it's one of those things that you definitely want to get the jump on your opponents, and you want to wait until everyone's kind of grouped together in a very tight area, which that does happen a lot in the game.
Yeah, her ultimate is fantastic, and similar to Zarya, I think, in terms of when it should be used, because Mei on her own probably doesn't have the firepower to actually kill off everyone that gets trapped in it. So you really want to coordinate if a teammate has an ult that they can use at the same time, or just to make sure you've got teammates around to finish off these frozen targets, because the worst thing is when you freeze 4 people and you realize you have no teammates around, you kill off one and the other 3 unfreeze and jump you. So yeah, you got to be careful and try and coordinate, but it is very, very powerful.
Yeah, I'd have to say it's probably one of those ultimates that, similar to Zarya's ultimate, which is the gravity well that kind of pulls everyone in one area. It's really useful when you use it in tandem with other teammates' abilities. So, if you get everybody frozen in that spot and then you use Hanzo's ultimate, you can do a lot of damage over a short amount of time and, potentially get 3-4 kills or even an entire team kill if planned correctly. So it's definitely one of my favorite ultimates in the game, but it is one of those things that it's not an instant win. You have to make sure that you time it correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you play Mei, who are some characters that you are trying to hunt down? Who are some characters that you see on the other team and it makes you switch to Mei? And then who are some characters that really give you trouble when you're playing Mei, if any?
So the interesting thing about Mei is that, this is a question that we ask with all of our character breakdowns. We say, who do you want to pair up against? Who do you want to fight? Who do you want to hunt down? And who do you want to defend against? And it's a tough question with Mei because it really is situational. I will say in my personal experience, generally with Mei, I am just absolutely try and avoid Zarya at all costs. Zarya is interesting because, Mei's ability to freeze people in place is extremely useful. And if that ability is negated by, let's say, a 2-second shield in which the person using that shield can kill you in those 2 seconds with a powered-up laser beam, it's hard to kind of counteract that, especially when they have a high health pool on top of that. So I would have to say Zarya is definitely one of those that I like to avoid when I'm playing Mei. A sniper, I'm going to say this with every character, any sort of sniper, while Mei does have her icicle and it is a great tool to use against snipers, she's not a sniper. That's not her forte. If anything, Mei is a adaptable character that can kind of be utilized in multiple situations. But if you're going toe to toe with a good Hanzo or a good Widowmaker, it's not impossible, but it's not the easiest thing to do because you basically have one ability or two, if you include her ice wall to counteract a sniper. So I generally try to avoid the Widowmakers, the Hanzos, and the Zaryas when I'm playing Mei. How about you?
Well, I think Mei is probably the hard counter to Genji. He really has to... I mean, he can use his dash to get away, but he can't do a ton. You really have to stay at medium range and be careful. So I really like playing Mei against Genji. I think most of the time you have the advantage on Tracer. Tracer can get away, just like she can get away from any character in the game, but if she's going to stay and engage, sooner or later you'll get her frozen. So more often than not, you can at least force Tracers to back off. But I think Mei really shines against most of the tanks. I agree Zarya can be a little bit of a problem because her shield will break the freeze counter, but the other tanks can't really do much of anything. If Mei gets around them and starts freezing them, they're going to drop when they're frozen, just like every other character. So I think Mei shines against tanks. As far as characters that she's weak against, I would say Reaper. That one is kind of a close call because Reaper has to get pretty close to kill you, but he does incredible damage. So even while Mei is trying to freeze Reaper, he can finish Mei off. I think Soldier is pretty good against Mei because he can usually do more damage at medium range and use his sprint to stay away from the frost. Maybe McCree, for the same reason, he can kind of keep his distance and do a lot of damage. I think Junkrat is actually the hard counter to Mei. It seems like his abilities all outrange hers, and even like when she ice blocks, you'll see a good Junkrat will just throw a trap right at her feet, and as soon as she breaks her ice block, she's trapped and she's dead. So Junkrat has a lot of abilities to keep his distance. He can use his mind to get out of her ultimate even to boost himself out. So yeah, Junkrat is pretty tough for Mei to take down.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree that as far as being a tank killer, as a Mei player, that's definitely one of my favorite things to do with her is to, specifically Reinhardt. I love taking out a Reinhardt with Mei. There's something about having this giant 10-foot tall dude in armor with a giant hammer, and being just this little Chinese woman that freezes him and then can, icicle him right in the face once or twice, and then he's dead. It's very empowering, but it's interesting. She's great as a tank killer. She can hold her own against snipers, and she does enough damage to a lot of the attack characters to kind of take them out in a short amount of time. So Mei is a very, very versatile character, and while having these great abilities, the 12-second cooldown on her cryo freeze, which makes her invulnerable, her 10-second cooldown on her ice wall, they kind of balance her out enough where you're not able to use these moves back to back to back. She's definitely one of those that you want to make sure that you're keeping an eye on her cooldowns, and you're using her abilities, spacing them out, and using them in a way in which you can do the most amount of damage possible, but at the same time, keep an eye on your teammates, try to protect them with that ice wall, with your ult, your blizzard if possible, and you can be flexible with her. You can use her both offensively, defensively, and try to be as useful a teammate as possible. So yeah, Mei is just a blast to play in that respect.
Yeah, she's a lot of fun, and as we mentioned at the top of this, you can get so creative with her abilities, especially the wall. I mean, the possibilities are really endless. As far as like things that I've learned playing her, I think she's really good at getting ahead, and you can use that wall to block off a team's spawn exit. So, if you're pushing a payload, you can get ahead of your team, and the other team just gets trapped in their spawn for, almost 5 seconds if you time it right. So just annoying things like that you're driving the other team nuts. It's going to affect their judgment. They're going to come after you first, even if they should probably go after Mercy. They're going to want you dead, and so you can really drive people nuts with it. As far as a few other things I've picked up playing Mei, I mentioned earlier using the wall to shield yourself on a point or ice block for the same reason, to buy time to get your team back there. Ice block will also clear debuffs like Orb of Discord. It's great for wiping that out if you get hit with it. And teammates can hide behind it while it's up, so not only will it protect, say, you from D.Va's ultimate, but teammates could hide behind it and it'll protect your whole team. So that's pretty cool. And then another thing that I noticed, when you use Mei's ult, it freezes everybody, but not instantly. And so a lot of times, if you ran into a point and you froze the other team, they kill you while they're being frozen. So it often is pretty beneficial to throw out your ultimate and then use your ice block. And then as soon as enemies are frozen, you can right click and break out of it, and then you can start finishing people off early. You don't have to wait for the 4 seconds. So it's been a pretty good combo.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And also, kind of going back to her ice wall, more ways to utilize it. It's great to be able to kind of use it as a barrier in between the opposing team's teammates. So, for example, let's say you have a Reinhardt being followed by a Mercy, which is a pretty dangerous combo because Reinhardt already has a high HP pool. And then if he has a Mercy, healing him while he has a shield up, it's a pretty difficult thing to do. If you're skilled enough with Mei, when you hit her ice wall ability, basically similar to Hanzo, where if you hit the ability, it doesn't immediately set it off. It puts you in that mode, and then you use your main fire to adjust it. If you hit the ice wall ability a second time, you can actually adjust the angle that you hit the wall. So you can hit it either horizontally or vertically. So if you're facing a team, let's say flanking them with Mei, you hit that ice wall button twice, you're able to shoot a vertical wall instead of one horizontally in front of you. You can use that wall to block a Mercy and kind of separate opposing teammates. So that way you're separating a healer, you're distracting them in a way in which the team has to spread out in some way, and sometimes that 4 seconds of spreading out that team is useful. Also, and I don't want to gloss over this at all because I had mentioned it briefly before, using her wall for mobility is extremely important as well. If you're good enough with Mei and you start getting really familiar with some of the maps, you can actually point straight down with the ice wall and lift yourself up to other points of the map, because the wall will actually lift you and other teammates. So, for example, there's been a few situations where I've worked together with a good friend of mine who plays Roadhog, And, Roadhog doesn't have many mobility options. But, if we're playing on Hanamura and let's say, hey, I need to get to this second level, instead of walking all the way around the level up the stairs to get there, I can literally point under Roadhog and myself, use the wall to lift us up to that second level, and boom, we save a valuable 10 seconds to basically set up our defenses against the opposing team. So using it for mobility, using it for defense, for offense, for protecting yourself from other ultimates, it's a really great ability. And you pair that with her cryo freeze and being able to regenerate her health while being invulnerable, and you have just a kick-ass character that's a blast to play.
And kind of touching on what you just mentioned, there's a few spots, I know one outside of Point B on Hanamura, where you can actually use it off the edge of the map and create a bridge where you can take a shortcut and jump over a gap out on that balcony in Hanamura. So just one example, but there's a lot of places like that where you can use it to either elevate yourself or take a shortcut. So yeah, get out there and get creative. The possibilities are endless with Mei.
They absolutely are endless. And if there's anything that we may not have mentioned, maybe some crazy situation that you found out with her, like I said, these abilities, there's so many options with them. So if there's anything that we may not have mentioned, please share it with us. Shoot us a comment. Let us know if there's any type of character that you don't like to face or that you found a great strategy against. Any specific areas on certain maps that you like to be able to move around with Mei. She's a versatile character, so we'd love to hear from you. So that was our in-depth character breakdown on Mei. For more information on our podcast, visit oppodcast.com, and you can also visit us on Twitter at HappyJamOP.
And I'm now at TruthiterOP.
And once again, thank you guys for listening. Join us next week for a more in-depth character breakdown of Overwatch characters, and we'll see you soon.